what it is when you're out there in the battle at the time, is you've got time to think. All these things that go through your mind, from what your feet are doing, what your head are doing, what am I watching.
Beautifully hit, confidently hit.
Oh, that'll do. Terrific look at the young man. Jonathan Trott, 100.
Well, that's through, and that's his 200. It's his first 200 in Test match cricket.
Well played, Jonathan Trott.
People have their own idea of why I left and what I did, and cricket got the better of me, or it got too tough and you ran away. I gave it everything I had.
It's Mental Health Awareness Week, and I'm joined by Marcus Trescothick and Jonathan Trott. Now, both had outstanding international careers, both experienced some mental health problems along the way. Guys, thanks ever so much for this. Not an easy subject to talk about, but a really important one. Trez, I'm going to start with you. How have you been doing? How's it been going in lockdown and the current situation as it is?
All okay, I think. Slight ups and downs along the way. It's been... I'm glad the weather's been great, that's for sure. So you can get out on the bike, or at least be out in the garden and just sort of occupying your time. But, I think you're right. It's just that interesting one. But it is a little bit up and down at times. But, most of it, 90% of it's been pretty good.
Toddy, when I rang up to organise this, you were queuing up outside a garden centre somewhere trying to get some stones. So the garden must be in good nick.
Yeah, I put some slate down today, so the borders are looking nice and neat. But I was standing in a queue just soaking up a bit of sun. Actually, it's very surreal being out and about and seeing how the world is a little bit different now. But Marcus is right. The weather has been good, and we're pretty lucky about that.
Right, let's talk about mental health, gentlemen. Again, Trez, I'll start with you on this. When did you feel? Go back to your playing days. When did you feel that your mental health was beginning to deteriorate?
It's a really tough one to answer that, because it never really felt to me like I was going downhill, really. I dealt with what I believe to be sort of home sickness or travel sickness, for a long period of time in my life. And I only ever really, when I went abroad to these various places playing cricket, that you just put down to the feeling rough or feeling like you do, just to the normal sort of emotions and homesickness that I'd had for many, many times. It wasn't until it really sort of kicked off when we were in India. I was ill. I was quarantined in my room for sort of 5-7 days because I was ill, and then spending that time there alone, and then gradually sort of being moving on to somewhere else, and it then got worse. And then I was just no idea what was going on at that point, because I had these feelings and emotions, and not sleeping, not eating, not going through, and not really being able to enjoy life or cope with what's going on. And that's when it went pear-shaped completely, when we were playing in the game in Baroda, where things dramatically sort of kicked off. And then I knew at that point I was in a world of trouble, because, A, I didn't know really what was going on, and B, I didn't know how to cope with it and deal with it and understand it. But, so you're talking 2006 was the sort of time for me when it really sort of kicked off. Hence then I came back from the tour of India. The rest is history after that.
I know these are difficult things perhaps to do, but can you just give us an idea what you were going through when you said it all kicked off and you didn't quite know what was happening? When you look back at it now, what were you feeling and what were you going through? What was it like?
Well, the feelings, funny enough, the feelings that I was then experiencing were very similar to what the feelings were of what I've always attributed to the homesickness. And so you basically get an anxiety feeling more than anything else. I've always suffered more with anxiety than depression. So then you get this constant feeling of adrenaline or alertness, or being worried about what's going on, how you're feeling, not being able to sleep properly or hardly at all, not really being able to eat, not being able to drink, because your body just is getting ready to run and fight or whatever it wants to do, so it just doesn't want to take anything on board. And just a fear of dread and anxiety and panic about what was happening. And, you put all these sort of things together. You're in the middle of a funny country and confined to a hotel, and the place is tricky outside. And it just escalates very fast, and we tried all sorts of things at the time, meditation and Tried some various drugs to, to sort of calm me down, some sort of diazepam, these sort of things. But it just didn't have any effect because it was so big and so great that we didn't know what was going on.
Trotty, you came back from Ashes Tour 13-14. Would you view that was that an episode that just happened at the time, or was that slowly building with you, and that's when it finally happened?
Yeah, certainly was building up, and I look back on it, and to answer your question, and when did I realise? It was probably during the home Ashes towards the summer of 13. We had just done really well in the Champions Trophy and unfortunately lost the final, and then went straight into the Ashes, a warm-up game, and didn't have a lot of time to sort of reflect on that and let it go a little bit. So almost doubled down the efforts and worked really hard and put a lot of pressure on myself in the Ashes. And then I remember we were in Durham, which was, I think, the third test. Sorry, that was the fourth test. We were in Durham, and I remember just not being able to concentrate, and which is something that I used to pride myself on, certainly in the nets and applying myself. There was something missing. And then going to the Oval, I knew I was in a little bit of trouble when I was at the Oval, not wanting to sort of play, and that's when the whole anxiety of actually putting the tracksuit on and going to the ground was when it would trigger it off, and just not wanting to play. Because when I was away from the ground, and everybody's situation has got similarities, but also very different at times. I mean, I love touring and that sort of stuff, and training, and it just the art or the form of playing cricket or the skill of it was something that was starting to dread, which I'd loved for my whole life up until then. So it was very weird and very unique, but also very terrifying at the same time, because you're not quite sure what's going on, because it feels so foreign. And you're exposed as well. There's so many cameras, they're everywhere. The cameras outside, there's cameras at training. So, it's really tricky to get a bit of alone time and make sense of it all.
When you guys listening to each other now, of course, you know each other really well. Have you talked much about this amongst yourselves?
A little bit. And I think when I first came back from Australia, I think Trez reached out and very kind of it, and we spoke a little bit. But I think you also have a mutual respect, and you don't want to sort of be seen to be preaching and saying, and also very, in a weird way, you almost don't want to be saying, well, I know what you're going through, because it sounds a bit as if you sort of preempting what somebody's going through, because it's very personal at the time. And so you have a little bit of respect for the other person, but it's quite a tricky ground to tread, if you know what I mean. Because everyone's different and has their own sort of things that are going on or that they're trying to work through.
Yeah, it is fascinating how it works. Because like a lot of what you're saying there, a number of things beforehand when you're talking about, the dread or the anxiety and not sure what was going on, totally relates to, to my sort of feelings and the same. But it's good to talk to other people and get a different perspective on it, to try and understand it. It was nice to talk to Trotty because we'd been through the same sort of process of playing for England, succeeding well and having a good career, and then suddenly coming back from a trip. So suddenly we had something we could relate to each other with straight away. And it was nice to hear, although a tough story, it was still good to talk to somebody who'd experienced the same thing.
Trotty, tell us what it was like in Australia. Of course, so early you came back from Australia. So before we talk about what happened when you came back, what were you going through? Let's say Brisbane, first test. What were you going through during that time?
Well, we'd had a few warm-up games. So warm-up games on an Ashes tour, you're there for almost a month, and we'd been training really hard, and I'd been doubling down and taking on this challenge, trying to sort of saw myself out, almost fight my way through, I thought, on the field, what I needed to do to start scoring runs and live up to the standards I set myself, which were very, very high. And I'd done pretty well against Australia in the past. And so working extra hard, we had there for a month, as I say, we had 3 travel days, and those were basically our days off. So all the other 27, 28 days before the first test match, we were working really hard. And I was absolutely fine away from the at the hotel and away from the game and away from the ground. It was absolutely fine, and it was only going to the ground or then getting to the test matches where the pressure was, the situation was, the scrutiny was. It was very, very different to any of the warm-up games, the 3 warm-up games that we played. So it was like being back in the Ashes a couple of months earlier. So I thought I had sort of figured it out, and I'd done really well in the warm-up games. My form was fine. I averaged close on 100 in the warm-up games. But then when I got to Brisbane and the scrutiny, it was just basically completely different and at another level that I'd never experienced. I remember being at breakfast. We had our own sort of breakfast area in the hotel, and literally putting my tracksuit on and going down to breakfast and just putting my cap over my eyes. I was just trying to sit away from all the guys so they hopefully wouldn't see that I was pretty emotional, eating my cornflakes, because it was like that. Someone who had enjoyed and thrived on the pressure of playing for England in those situations. All of a sudden it was, very much life or death, and it was completely different perspective of how it had been in the past, where 4 years earlier we'd had such a fantastic test match there. So memories are very contrasting.
Short delivery, away on the offside, that's it. That's very, very well played. Marcus Trescothick has scored his maiden test century, and he's done it in style.
Back to you, Trez. I mean, are these sort of things that you were feeling when you were out there as well, in your situation?
Yeah, I don't think mine was really related around sort of cricket as much. Cricket was almost a bit that helped because it distracted me from how bad I was feeling. I remember, there was one night that the doctor sort of spent time in my room, like trying to help me get to sleep, and I just couldn't get to sleep. But then the morning afterwards, you're so tired because I've been taking sleeping tablets and they haven't been really working. You then go into the ground, having not really had much breakfast or not really drunk anything, and you think you're in India, playing in these sort of temperatures, that it's going to be tricky to survive. But I was running on pure adrenaline. The feeling and the anxiety pumping through me was so bad that you can just sort of just about manage it, and you go out and you do everything. I felt so sick and so nervous and so, sort of petrified about what the feeling was and what was happening. The best thing I could do was be out there batting, because I knew that it was distracting me. And it's funny enough, the minute I got out and I'm walking off back to the ground, back to the changing room, I knew I was gone. I'm in tears, I'm literally 50 yards from the boundary, just about to get in, and that's it. I cracked, and it just falls to pieces at that point. Walking to the change room, everyone knows then I've gone, and it's all, the world is coming down on me at a rate of knots. I'm in floods of tears in the changing room. Phil Neal's there, Duncan's there, and I think all the boys realised then that something was seriously wrong, but they didn't know exactly what.
How did you deal with that situation? Did you sort of keep yourself a little bit isolated from the team, or did you say, look, who did you go and talk to? How did you try and get yourself through that situation?
The point there where I cracked and I was in the changing room, I didn't care. I didn't care. I was gone at that point. I knew that I felt so bad and so scared about what was happening that I wanted to get out. And whoever saw me at that point, I didn't care, because that was, and nothing was relevant to me at that point apart from the fact that I felt so scared about what was happening.
I guess as well, Trez, you in the era you played in, I mean, I played a lot with you, but I played a bit before that there wasn't really the support mechanisms. People weren't talking about mental health in those days. It wasn't really something that we knew much about, almost. No. It's going to sound really naive, but we didn't really.
No, well, I think it was in the wider public, obviously it was talked about in a little bit, and if you had mental health problems, you were nuts and you were cuckoo and all these sort of things. But really, yeah, you're right. Even though, we didn't really understand what was going on. It wasn't until after this sort of point that sport in general, cricket, I know the ECB and the PCA put so much more time and effort into working out what is going on with mental health problems, because we could see, we had a case right in front of us where it had happened and we didn't know what to do. So we had to upskill ourselves in every department with the boards, and they had to get better at it, which they did. And luckily enough, and society in general has done more and more to try and understand the problems that come with it. And the acceptance with it is so much more greater now compared to when it wasn't initially.
I mean, I remember you guys would know Steve Bull. I mean, when I played in mid-90s, late 90s, when Trez was just around that time, early 2000s, Steve would come and have a team meeting. And I remember one in particular around the World Cup in '99, and he'd hold this team meeting, and it was all great, very informative, great stuff. And then he would say, or perhaps the team management would say, well, he's available for individual sessions if you want. And it was almost like, we looked around the dressing room, and it was almost like, well, why would we need to go and speak to a psychologist? It was almost like it was still in that era where I think people were still seeing it. Well, I've got a major problem if I need to see a psychologist.
Ball that'll do. Jonathan Trott, 100.
Can't bowl straight to Trott. Tucks it away.
Don't get him early, he'll hurt you all day.
He goes on and on and on. Relentless batting. And there it is. A remarkable innings by a remarkable player.
What was it like, Trotty, for you? I mean, Trez has talked about his situation. What was it like for you? Were there people you could go to, and how did you deal with that situation?
I think it may have been a little bit different. I think, as everyone knows, the backroom staff seems to grow and grow and grow. So there was probably more support staff, and you obviously have your own doctor or sports psychologist there with you. I'm not quite sure if the 2006-7 era would have had that. But yeah, it was a little bit foreign as well for them because it was new and sort of unique in that situation going on Ashes tour, the heights of sort of publicity and scrutiny. So there was a bit of stuff going on in the background. What are we going to say? What's a press release? So all this is going around. So we basically just, I didn't know what was the doctor basically couldn't say. He said if it was a normal 9-to-5 job where you're, you're staying at home and you travel backwards and forwards from work, you just be signed off, give yourself 2 weeks holiday and try and sort yourself out type thing. And just a bit of a break. But you can't do that on an Ashes tour. And the interesting thing for me is, the whole sort of media world changed from the start of my international career in 2007 and my test match debut in 2009 to 2013/14 season. Was the whole of the media changed, the scrutiny changed, the way that the game was broadcast, and the whole social media thing boomed around that era. So being able to sort of escape from the game a little bit became so much harder. If you didn't read a newspaper or didn't watch the news, you could sort of, shelter yourself a little bit from it. But because of mobile phones and apps and all that sort of stuff, highlights packages, it's everywhere. It's pretty hard to get away from. So trying to get a bit of a break from the game was different.
Trotty has been suffering from a stress-related condition for quite a while. He's always managed it very successfully. And he's been a brilliant international batsman for England, and hopefully will continue to be a brilliant international batsman for England in the future.
So coming back from Australia, we just basically said, well, I've got a stress-related illness. And that, to me, it didn't seem like it was good enough for the press. And the press and the media, for them, that wasn't clarity enough. It was a little bit grey. But the reason why it was because we weren't quite sure, I wasn't quite sure exactly what was going on, and that's things like that only get diagnosed. I only properly got diagnosed after I left the tour in end of November, probably the end of March, beginning of April actually, properly got a proper diagnosis of what I needed to do and figured it out. So that's 5 months of trying to figure it out. So when people want you to say what it is there and then, 24 hours later or 12 hours later, it's almost impossible.
So obviously people have their own struggles and people have their own idea of why I left and what I did, and cricket got the better of me, or it got too tough and he ran away, and I gave it everything I had basically, and I knew that I was fighting as hard as I could, but I didn't have the staying power to get everything that I wanted to do right.
It's a lot more clearer now in terms of what it said. They just say they're struggling with their mental health, and that covers that much of a bracket.
Yeah.
That, it's like, okay, brilliant. Thanks for letting us know, and it's carry on.
The other thing now is I think there's a lot more acceptance with it. I think people are more understanding, and I think there's more information and people are more aware of it. So. And I think you also get that space. Whereas with me, I certainly felt when I came home, I remember arriving home the next day when it, dropped my daughter at school. I had a television, a video camera stuck over the hedge and a microphone shoved over the hedge asking what was going on and what the story was. And a car following me to school and following me back from the school. So, and I think that would be very different now. I think if people, sportsmen or anybody in this world says, I'm struggling a little bit, I think they get that space nowadays, and they're afforded that space through the understanding and the acceptance nowadays. It's slightly different to perhaps sort of 10 years ago.
Exactly the same for me. That because initially when I came back, we reported it said I'm going home for personal reasons. Well, that
Yeah, no, that opens a whole new
family and all sorts, don't they? And they think, what's going on? So the minute you get back, there's people knocking on the door, there's people following you down the road. What's going on? What's going on? And they're wanting the answer to what it is. You're right, exactly right. Hey, I didn't know what was going on. I just felt awful. But eventually, over time, you get that sort of understanding. But now, because of that, now they just say, they're struggling with mental health.
Yeah,
makes it so much easier for them.
Yeah.
And you're right, the acceptance of to allow people that bit of space is perfect for them now.
Yeah, I remember getting back actually, and knowing that the camera guys were outside and the reporters were outside, and then the doorbell going. I remember just hiding around the corner of my house. I'll never forget that feeling, actually, just sitting there, almost sort of like, just leave me alone, please. I haven't even been home for 24 hours. And I understand people's wanting to know. It's an action. It's a massive thing, and but it's a case of, I remember the reporter, I could hear the reporter from around the corner saying, I'm sorry, but I don't really want to be here, but my newspaper sent me here and told me to ring on the doorbell. And that's the sort of intrusiveness. And I think the ECB then got a sort of, I don't know what if it's called, it was a sort of restraining order or whatever like that from the paper. And so that's the level it was at. And I think, but also the perhaps lack of understanding when somebody says, the headline was that sort of stress-related illness. We thought that would be okay, and people would be understanding of that, because that's all I could come up with. In hindsight, I wanted to be as honest as possible with them. I remember sitting down with the media liaison, the doctor, team manager, and sort of all that, and just saying, I want to be open up front about this as much as possible. If I torn my hamstring, it would have been a lot easier.
Yeah.
And more acceptance, probably.
I mean, Tres, from the moment you arrived home, how long do you think it took for you to be, shall we say, in a sort of comfortable space with yourself again, having gone through that?
So I was lucky, I suppose, through the same as Trolley, we got help with the PCA, and there was obviously the trust is set up, which is then the benevolent fund, to get you the support and talking to somebody and getting doctors in front of you to be able to start the process. I reckon it took me a good few months. I couldn't tell you exactly how long, but there was a good few months before I sort of finally, they said, this is what it is. This is what we can do to treat it. And this is the journey that it will more than likely look like. So, until you get to that point, you still sort of, I was so up and down. I'd be okay for a week and thought, oh, great. I'm feeling great. I'm back in the security of my home. I'm out of the way of everything. And then suddenly there's another knock at the doorstep on the doorbell, and I'm plummeting down to the floor because I'm so worried and paranoid about what is going on. So, the journey that you take in the emotional roller coaster of that time until you can start to go at it. And the best thing was, exactly like Trotty said, he wanted to be honest. The best thing was to just tell them the truth.
How did you feel? How long did it take you, Trotty?
I felt 6 weeks. I remember the 6 weeks of the day coming home thinking, actually, I feel like playing cricket again. And that was because the only reason why I remember it was it was exactly 6 weeks to the day. And I can put a finger on it. But, going back into playing cricket was completely different for me then. And I remember my first game back, having done a bit of work with a psychologist, I hadn't addressed what I needed to. I then realized, because I hadn't been back in that pressure situation, everything was fine. I felt fine at home. I felt decent in the nets. But then when the cameras rocked up again at Edgbaston for a 4-day game, which had never happened before, and following you around to the nets on the cold ground and back, and that whole scrutiny started again, I don't think I'd addressed what was actually at the root of the problem, the whole pressure and the anxiety and that caused. It was only then, after taking another couple of weeks break and actually then working with Dr. Steve Peters, was that he actually said, well, you've been misdiagnosed. I can tell you exactly what's wrong with you within one meeting of him. I remember driving up to the Peak District and meeting him, and within half an hour knowing exactly I know this guy can sort me out. I'll be fine now, and I'll be able to get back up to play for England.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I guess that was via the ECB that they put you in touch with Stephen Peterson.
No, it was actually through a contact. My agent at the time, a friend of his, actually had done a piece with him. He was through a journalist actually.
Yeah.
Got the contact. If I hadn't met Steve Peters, I'm not sure. I don't know where I would have ended up playing wise, or whether I would have played anymore.
Because I came back, I started seeing a therapist that the PCA had set me up with. And then gradually over time, I think probably might have been when I came back from Australia the second time, after I'd mucked it up again, not only once, but twice.
When Marcus came off the field in the afternoon and, and there was a reoccurrence of the problem he had in India, and we sat and chatted him. Well, I didn't. I left it to the doc to sit and have a chat to him. And after a while, we spoke to him and said to him, look, it's best that he does go home.
I went and saw Dr. Steve Peters, and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
It was not what I needed.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously his history and what he'd done with, with sports psychology and people is incredible. And the books that he'd written that are great. And they're obviously important for people to understand, but it wasn't me. That wasn't what I needed. I didn't need to be able to get myself back into trying to play cricket. I needed to get my life back together. I needed to understand what was going on with my head, because I didn't know. It wasn't about, for me, the cricket and getting back out on the pitch and the cameras following me so much. It was more about, I just feel crap and I don't know why, to help me feel better. And I didn't feel that was going to work for me in that way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things, anybody listening or watching. I think when you have that connection, I think when you have that feeling that somebody gets it and you understand, but also you can see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. I remember with sitting down with the first psychologist that I saw. He didn't really have an understanding. He was more of a normal, everyday psychologist, nothing to do with sport or understanding the pressures that go with millions of people watching you, and couldn't really relate to that, I felt. And I didn't feel like I could relate to him and what he was saying with regards to when you're standing and you're facing a bowler coming into bowl and having a natural understanding of what you're going through. I think what happened with Steve Peters, what I like so much, he's very black or white. You would say, well, I'm thinking this or I'm feeling this. You'll go, but that's wrong. And then you need to feel that. Why are you thinking that? Why don't you feel this? And I like the black and white and how he just sort of said, well, this is what you should do. Why aren't you doing it? And I was like, well, actually, I never really thought of it that way. And he had no understanding of cricket. I remember the first time I went there, he said, when you walk out into the cricket green, and I was sort of like, this guy has no understanding of cricket, but that's actually what I wanted. I wanted him to teach me, because he's a psychiatrist. He actually tells you how the brain works and why are you thinking that. And for me, I enjoyed that, because then I could sort of control, well, if I think that, then this is how I'll feel, or I just had a better understanding and a more of a natural feeling with him.
Fascinating, isn't it? It's fascinating what worked for you just was complete opposite for me.
Yeah.
Both
absolutely.
Playing in the same industry and the same thing, but just complete different spectrums for what it is. The guy that I wanted to see, sorry, Trott, I'll come back to you now. So the guy that I saw, and obviously the guy that I saw initially is still the guy that I speak to now. So all the way through of trying different people, I came back to the first person because I knew that's what was best for me. Sorry,
well,
Trott.
I think because, as you said there, you weren't trying to sort your cricket out. Your cricket was fine. It was more off the field. Well, I was trying to sort the cricket out, because off the field I was fine. I felt 100%. It was until I put the tracksuit on and knew I was going to the game. So it was just basically that. It was nothing to do with off the field. Yes, there are a few things that obviously you need to do off the field and prepare you for cricket and the way you think about the game. But it was in that situation or in that moment where the pressure and the anxiety was, where just changing my thought pattern and the way that I thought about the game, and getting that perception back, the sort of appreciation for the game, and not thinking about the perception, but more the way that you think about it and how you feel. The clarity was next to nothing.
Well, that's through, and that's his 200. Well, what a way to finish off the international season for Marcus Trescothick.
Where are you right now then? I mean, with this situation, are you kind of Still suffering a little bit from time to time? Are you free of it? I mean, Trez, I'll start with you. How are you doing at the moment?
So this is something I deal with, I suppose, on a day-to-day basis, on a monthly basis. By, you know, it's just there. It almost sort of sits dormant until something kicks off, and it's quite situational for me now. If something goes wrong or something I'm not comfortable with, I can feel it spark straight away, and the sort of instant sort of tingling down the back of my neck, and just sort of that's. Then I go, oh no, here we go. So it's like then it becomes a little journey for me to sort of take a bit of time to get back on track. I take various medications. I take an antidepressant in the morning, and I take an anti-anxiety in the evening. Both work at different points and doing different things. And that really helps me, especially the anti-anxiety one in the evening. That really helps me. But I don't know. I've not found a way for it to just to put it to bed and just forget about it and accept it. Yes, I accept it, but I can't. I don't know. It lies dormant for me until something sort of kicks me off. But I'm so much more in control of it now than I was because 90% of the times when it sort of I can feel it or something sparks within me, I carry on as normal and I just sort of do the day-to-day jobs that I do, go play golf or go to cricket, coach now, do what we have to do and carry on as normal. It's only then when it gets to that certain point where it flips the switch and suddenly, right, I need to take a bit of a break now and I need to take a bit of time to speak to the psychologist, maybe up my medication and do the other little bits which I know that are important when I get really bad, that it can then take a week, 2 weeks before it comes back down to normal.
I mean, we played a lot together over the years and we're good mates, and I sometimes ring you up and the one thing you always say to me is routine. If I'm in a routine, then I'm much happier and much safer. I mean, can you sort of explain why does that make you feel happier? And why does that make it easier to cope with?
I almost need a structure to my day-to-day life. And you know, playing cricket gave you that structure because you'd be in the ground in the morning at 9 o'clock, 8:30, whatever it is. You'd be playing all day. You'd go home in the evening, a couple of hours chatting to the wife or the kids, and then go to bed, get up and do it all again. So then when summertime finished and then you get to winter time and you're playing county cricket, so you have 6 weeks off at the end of the season, that was always a bit of a struggle for me, you know, because it was the downtime where suddenly I'm getting up in the morning, it's like, right, I've got nothing to do here. You know, I'm gonna have to try and work out what to do, and it takes a little bit of time. So I then, part of my structure now, part of my coping strategies is to deal with that and keep busy by structuring things in. When I know I'm going to have a period of downtime at the end of the season, okay, like, you know, we've done quite a lot of the bike rides, or you know, I sort of plan in my days playing golf, or now working at a school, so I'll be then making sure I go and do extra days and sort of get those in. I don't like 5-6 days off, week off. You know, up until this point. Now, this is obviously where this challenge has come in now for lockdown, because, you know, we're in that position. What the hell are you going to do? You know, it's not like I can go and see my mates or I can drive to the ground and go and do everything. So I've had to work out a different way of getting that routine. And that's as simple as, right, I'm going to take the dog out for a walk. I'm then going to go in the gym, in the garage. I'm then going to go out on my bike in the afternoon. So you then sort of you get your routine. I've built the routine for lockdown, which has always been the issue. So once you get that understanding and you know what you're trying to do, it definitely makes your brain is more active and you're thinking ahead rather than sort of dwelling on what's going to be happening.
The more I hear you guys talk and the more I see you on my screen there, the more I'm thinking I'm the common theme here. I open with you a lot and I played with you a lot, Trotty, as well. Yeah. I reckon my boring cricketing stories might have sent you both over the edge. I think I've got a lot to answer for.
Yeah, I agree with that.
How are you doing, Trotty?
Yeah, fine. I think everything was based around cricket and just getting the perspective right of that. So now now that I'm retired from cricket, it's a case of you know, filling that drive and passion that I had for the game, and obviously going into other aspects of that, and obviously getting older and doing other things. So you know, pretty keen with the coaching and pretty determined with that. But you know, away from the game, it's always been fine. It's managing the pressure and then the the way that I think about the game, but also the expectations I had on myself, with cricket being such a black and white, success or failure game, that if I didn't have the perspective right and the amount of pressure I put on myself and the drive, that's when I used to become a little bit unstuck.
Can I just pick up on that? I mean, we played a lot together at Warwickshire over the years, and I can't remember playing alongside someone who played with so much intensity that you did. It meant so much. I mean, county cricket had to be international cricket. I had to be the best player in the team. I have to be number one player. This drive that you had was unbelievable. And you're in a professional environment where so many others want to be the same, but you stood out. Do you think in some ways that may have contributed in a small way, or perhaps even in a larger way, to the problems you may have had since?
Absolutely. I think it's double-edged sword, and I think it's what got me to the top and helped me be part of such a successful side for the time that we were together. But also not unchecked or unmanaged, you see the results of it, and when it's not really tamed. So, that's the sort of, everyone who gets to the level, international level, has a deep burning drive and desire, and you have to do a little bit more and extra to get to that level. But it's maintaining that balance is what I think is always, I admire the guys who have the longevity of the game, the guys who go on and play for 12, 15 years, handling the pressure, but also keeping that sort of form. And I take my hat off to them a lot, because to play international cricket and the way the schedule is nowadays, it does take its toll.
Yeah, I mean, thinking of your case, Trez, I mean, again, I'm not sure you would be quite in the same league intensity-wise as Trotty was with your cricket. But do you think cricketers in general are slightly vulnerable to this situation because of the rigours and demands of the game, if you like?
I don't know. I can't see why it would be any different to any other industry in the world. Yes, there are times in the winter, if you're playing international cricket, that you are going to be in foreign countries, away from your family and stuck in hotel rooms. But so do many other, walks of life have a similar sort of process. But, there are a lot of cases within cricket, more recently and obviously then more historic, about problems with mental health. So, when you're looking at it and there's 1 in 3, 1 in 4 people struggle with it in general public, then I wouldn't say there's any difference within cricket or in any other sport. It's just maybe that it's been talked about more in cricket, and it's been highlighted more by a few of the guys coming out and talking about it a bit more. But someone shoot me down and tell me I'm wrong. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not. I can't.
Yeah, I mean, I think that cricket's got a lot of unique characteristics. I think nobody. Obviously, golf's 4 days as well, but you have the sort of 7 hours of in every day for 4 days at the ground. Very rarely, or any other sport is like that. You'll play your football or your rugby. You'll turn up in 2 hours. You'll be gone. So, I think the cricket is very different to that. I think you get the people who perhaps struggle away from the game and in everyday life. I think cricket actually helps you. So for me, I think having the cricket was, I had the structure that you say is important, which I then would be looking forward to going to cricket the next day. I think that gives you a break. Whereas I think also with cricket, the constant pressure of it, I think guys like myself who put themselves under pressure, it'll keep building unchecked. I think that's when you become a little bit unstuck. So it's slightly different to any other sport, I feel. And that's what makes it unique, and maybe different characteristics of different characters and people. You see that effect.
As we said earlier, both your international careers were terrific, but cut short by this problem. I know, Trotty, you tried to make a comeback. We might talk about that a little bit later. But how do you reflect back, both of you, Trez, on your careers, on your international careers, bearing in mind that it was stopped in this manner?
I had a great time playing, just over 6 years, and it was immense, every bit of it. It's parts of touring. I used to love touring. It was just great fun. You had no stresses, or so I thought. No worries of just sort of being away and just sort of chilling out, and you just live the life. And it was amazing for a bit. I would have loved to have played for 10 years or 12 years. Of course I would have done, because I had so much passion for the game and just enjoyment of playing on the big stage and enjoying myself, and doing everything that you did as a high quality cricketer. But I made peace with it pretty quickly once I realised that I wasn't able to do it anymore, and there was a bigger problem that I needed to be aware of, and I could still do the job by playing for Somerset and playing county cricket and have enjoy the life of what a professional sportsman was. It just wasn't quite at the peak of where you could be. But I was comfortable with that, because I knew if I was going to put myself back in that environment, I was going to put myself in a lot of pain and a lot of suffering, which I wasn't prepared to do. So I was comfortable enough to go, thanks very much. It's not for me anymore. Although I loved it, it's just the right thing to do is to walk away now and be involved with Somerset and keep it as simple as I needed to there.
If you'd offered the career that I had to the guy that rocked up at Warwickshire in 2003 with a lot more hair than I have now, I would have snatched your hand off. So to be part of the side that that I played in, the players, the characters, the series that we managed to win, amazing and fun times. So yeah, the things I'd like to have done differently, and different things I would have perhaps done would have been nice, and would have been seen how if I would have played a little bit longer. Yes, I would have liked to play more than I did. But nobody's got a divine right to play for England and be successful and score runs or take wickets. So my lot has certainly made me happy, and I'm very proud of what I've done. So I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah, I mean, when you say there, I might have done things slightly differently. What are you kind of making reference to?
I look back in 2013. I remember Andy Flower coming to me and saying, you've had a bit of a long summer as well. You've played in the Ashes. You played the Champions Trophy. We had New Zealand toured earlier, where we played 2 tests and 3 ODIs against them, and everyone else was having the ODIs against Australia after the Ashes draw, except for Joe Root, who had only just come on the side, and Kevin, who hadn't played in the Champions Trophy. And I said, no, I want to play because I want to get back in form. And I'd averaged 35 in that Ashes series, and previous Ashes series I'd averaged 90 against Australia. So my perspective was out of sync completely. And I remember saying, no, I want to play in this and get back into form before we go to Australia. Whereas now, if I hadn't played in that ODI series, I wonder if my career would have been a little bit longer and wouldn't have ended at Brisbane, or wouldn't have had to have taken a break at Brisbane. If I'd have been able to say, no, I'm going to have a bit of a break. I'll have 3 weeks off and then train really hard, get ready for the Ashes. Whereas we played for those 3 weeks and it just snowballed. And it's interesting how sort of Trez says that he knows when it's starting. I can sort of feel when it's starting as well a little bit. Sort of a snowball effect where it just gathers this momentum and pace and gets builds and builds until eventually, it becomes a huge snowball and hits something and explodes. You can feel that sort of building, and looking back on it now, if I'd been able to stop that momentum, I would have certainly changed that. And that's only it, really.
I guess, well, that's in hindsight. I mean, Trey, you mentioned earlier, 1 in 4 people in the UK this year are probably going to experience some mental health problems of their own. There might be people listening to this saying, cool, that's me. I've had those problems, but didn't perhaps realise it. What if they are thinking that? What do they do? How do they deal with it? What do they do next?
Well, more than likely, with this current situation, it's probably going to breed a few more people around the general public, isn't it, to make it worse. But you've just got to try and talk to somebody, try and tell someone how you're feeling, try and express the thoughts that you're going through. That could be a loved one, it could be a mate, it could be the doctor. Just try and get it off your chest, to try and then, because then you can get some clarity on what it is, and start the journey of getting help to feeling better. And there's lots of different ways that you will start feeling better. And it's not all about medication. It's not all about relaxation or meditation or whatever, all these things. You find your own method and you find your own way, but you've got to find a way of telling someone or talking to somebody to start the journey of getting better.
Trez, I think the best thing you could do, or the best thing for that, if somebody's speaking to you about it, is actually just to listen. A lot of the time, if you're talking to someone and you feel like they're judging or they're questioning you, you almost start closing up a little bit because you feel like you're being judged. And the last thing you want to do is actually, I think, is being a good listener. I think that's the most powerful thing, is actually be able just to listen to somebody if they're being honest and opening up to you. I think that is the most powerful thing, because I certainly, when trying to speak to people or speaking to teammates, you're always a little bit wary about the perception they're going to have of you after you open up to somebody. And the how powerful it was whenever I spoke to somebody who opened up, whether it wasn't even meant to be, whether it was just in a passing comment or a passing conversation, and how it actually, I felt a lot better about myself when somebody actually just listened and actually went, and actually gave you the time of day. I think nowadays, that's one of the most crucial things. And we live in such a tech world where everything's texted or emailed, when actually people don't actually look you in the face and have a conversation and ask you how you are, what's going on, and that personal sort of contact or communication, that perhaps that skill's not as good as it perhaps was in the past, but I think we could certainly learn from that.
Gents, we've talked for quite a long time here. We're nearly at the end, I think. But before you go, great to see you guys involved in coaching, and I know you're doing some stuff with England Lions and England, etc. Do you think that your life experience and all the stuff you've talked so brilliantly about in the last half an hour, 45 an hour, whatever, do you think that will help you as a coach? Because you'll have empathy perhaps with some players who are maybe struggling in this area.
For sure. I think, to exactly like Trotty says there, to be able to sit down and listen when somebody comes to you. Already, I did an interview with Don Best the other day, which is for the PCA. And we've had that sort of process, obviously played as teammates and now as a coach-player relationship. You built that relationship already so that he can come to you and say, yeah, I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with that. But of course, if even just going through the process of struggling with some form of mental health makes you more aware of seeing it in other people and how they express it in their body language, their conversations, what they might say. So you're one step ahead because you can sort of read the signs on some people more than others. But it's bound to help, because you can relate to it and you can understand it when they come and said to you, I've got all these thoughts, and you go, yeah, that's pretty normal. That's how it works. It just helps being able to know that you've been through it and they got somebody they can talk to.
Yeah, 100%. And I'd agree with that. I think you certainly, you have a bit more of a trained eye for it. And I think going into the coaching world now, I think it's important to be as approachable as possible on it and open with guys, so you can help as much as possible. That's what you want to do in the end as a coach, is be able to help guys on and off the field is the most important thing. So you can, it's interesting though, and you got to time it though, if you wait for somebody to come to you or you actually step in and say, but sometimes players can get their guard up. You can say, certainly about personal things, not so much their game, but also how they are on and off the field. So, that's the trick to it. And I think that's the art and the skill in it.
And Trotty, all those batsmen that you've been working with, they'll all be just getting over to the offside and just clipping it through the leg side. Will they through mid-wicket now?
Every time I see guys scratching their guard, I tell them to stop it. Please stop that.
Great stuff.
Do not go down that route. It's a treacherous route. Down there.
We'll leave it there, gents. Really enjoyed it. Terrific stuff. Thanks so much for the great insight and recalling all that's happened in your great careers.
Sky Sports Cricket. Feel it all.